Now, the second crime that Bob could have been charged with was conspiracy. Now, again, you have to ask yourself, were the elements for conspiracy satisfied? Now, conspiracy is defined in the Virgin Islands Code as two or more persons conspiring to commit any crime. If this happens, then they are both guilty of conspiracy. So we know that Bob and his wife Judy conspired to commit arson. Based on the facts that were presented to you in the problem, we know that they had a discussion about Bob burning this house down. We know that the wife, Judy, went and purchased the gasoline for this. So we know that we had two or more persons, Bob and his wife, conspire to commit any crime. And in this case, that crime was arson. So were the elements for conspiracy satisfied? Do we have enough evidence to charge Bob with conspiracy? Yes. Now we get into attempted murder. Now, as you all know from the explanations that I left the individuals who selected attempted murder, you now know that attempted murder was an incorrect choice and that Bob could not be charged with attempted murder. So, again, were the elements satisfied? Okay, this is the question that you should be asking yourself every time when you're trying to determine whether or not someone can be charged with a crime. So here, attempted murder, whoever unsuccessfully attempts to commit murder, which is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought, is guilty of attempted murder. So to charge someone with attempted murder, in other words, we have to prove that this person was trying to commit a murder. They had the intent of murdering someone. That was their desire. That is what they set out to do. And for some reason, they fell short of completing the murder. But they did enough to where they could be charged with attempted murder. Now, malice aforethought, what that is the intent to inflict serious bodily harm or the intent to commit murder. You have to have that intent, that malicious intent, that willful intent to commit murder. Okay? Again, whoever unsuccessfully attempts to commit murder, which is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought, is guilty of attempted murder. Now, based on the facts that were presented to you, can Bob be charged with the attempted murder of Rastapal, who was inside of the home when he set the fire? And the answer to that question ultimately is no, because the elements are not satisfied. We cannot prove that Bob tried to kill this individual who was inside of the home. We cannot prove that. We cannot prove that malice aforethought, that intent to commit murder, that specific intent to commit murder. We cannot prove, based on the facts that were presented to you, that this was Bob's intent. The facts indicate that Bob was of the belief that everyone who lived in that home had left and fled the territory to get away from the hurricane. Bob saw the family driving off in their car with their car packed up. They were heading out back to Chicago to escape the storm that was coming. There was no indication in the facts presented to you that Bob knew that anyone was in that home. So with that being said, we cannot convince a judge that Bob intended on killing this guy and he failed to kill him because he escaped through a window, and therefore we're going to charge him with attempted murder. If there was something in the facts to indicate that Bob knew that this individual was in the home at the time that he set the fire, then that would be a different story. But those facts were not presented to you. Now, one of you raised a very good question or concern or challenge, if you will, and that question was, how do we know what Bob's intent is right then and there? When we get to the scene as a law enforcement officer, all we know is that a fire was started at this house, someone was in the house, they were almost killed as a result of this fire. That constitutes attempted murder. When we get on the scene as a law enforcement officer, we don't know that Bob didn't know that someone was in the house. We don't know that he didn't have the intention right then and there. All we know is that a house is on fire, someone escaped who had to be transported to the emergency room, and that person almost died. So the student was asking pretty much, why can't we just charge with attempted murder right then and there? Because we don't know that these other facts exist. We don't know that Bob didn't know that there was no one in the house. And the answer is this: you cannot charge Bob with attempted murder at that stage because you don't have the probable cause to do so. You must have probable cause to make an arrest. If you don't have probable cause for the arrest that you've made, that then becomes an unlawful arrest. And any evidence that you obtain as a result of that unlawful arrest is null and void. It cannot be used, and the entire thing will be thrown out, because arresting someone without probable cause is a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights. So the police officers had probable cause to arrest Bob for arson because they had the surveillance footage that showed Bob setting the house on fire. That is probable cause to arrest him for starting the fire. So once they bring him into the station after he's been arrested for starting the fire, you then conduct an investigation. You have a talk with Bob. You ask him, did you know that anyone was in this home? Did you set this house on fire knowing that someone was in there? So this is where the detectives and the police work comes in. And then based on your investigation, based on the evidence that you have gathered from your interrogation of Bob, then you can determine if you have enough probable cause to arrest him for attempted murder. But you just can't get on a scene, arrest someone, and then take them to the station to determine whether or not there was probable cause for the arrest. Because at that point, you've already arrested them without probable cause. So any evidence that you obtained from that unlawful arrest cannot be used against that individual that you arrested. So I hope that this is clear. I hope that you all understand why Bob could not be charged with attempted murder. Because even if at the time the officer discovered the surveillance footage and discovered that there was enough probable cause to arrest Bob for the arson, if the officer then decided to add on the charge of attempted murder right then and there, By the time we make it to the probable cause hearing, the advice of rights, the judge will say there's enough probable cause to charge this individual with arson in the first degree. But I'm not going to find probable cause for attempted murder because there's not enough evidence here to convince me that this is what he intended to do. So what will happen is that charge will be thrown out and we will only be allowed to go forward on the arson charge. Therefore, not being able to charge this individual with attempted murder. There must be probable cause at all times in order to arrest someone for a crime. This is why attempted murder, although it may have seemed tempting, was not a correct choice because there was not probable cause to arrest for attempted murder. There was nothing in the facts to indicate that Bob knew anyone was in the home or that it was in fact his intent to try to set anyone on fire. I hope that explanation was clear. If it is not, please let me know via email and I can try to set up a one-on-one with you to clarify that concept even further. But I just want you all to understand the importance of have the elements been satisfied, because if they have not, then you can't charge anyone with any crimes. The next thing that I saw was some students had charged Bob as an accomplice. Now, the code says that whoever, and by the code I mean the Virgin Islands Criminal Code, the code says whoever commits a crime or offense or aids, abets, counsels, commands, induces, or procures its commission is punishable as an accomplice and can be incarcerated for up to the maximum time allowed under the penalty section for the underlying crime. Now, for accomplice crimes, it is important to understand that there's a principal and then there's the accomplice, okay? The principal is the person who actually commits the crime, okay? The principal is the person who actually set the house on fire. The accomplice is the individual who aids, assists, encourages, or supports the principal in the commission of the crime. Now, I don't like the way this statute is worded because it says whoever commits a crime. So that gives off the impression that Bob could be an accomplice because he committed a crime which was first-degree arson. But you cannot be the principal and be charged as an accomplice. So I hope that is clear. The principal is the person that actually pulls the trigger, that actually starts the fire, that actually stabs the person with a knife, okay? The accomplice is the person who buys the gasoline for the principal to start the fire, okay? The accomplice is the person who provides the gun that the principal shot when he killed the victim. All right, the accomplice is the person who went to Home Depot and bought the butcher knife that he gave to the principal who ended up stabbing the victim. So if you are the principal, you can't also be the accomplice. The accomplice is the person that helps the principal to complete the crime. As a result, Bob cannot be charged as an accomplice because he was in fact the principal who set the home on fire. Next, we are going to talk about the crimes that Judy, Bob's wife, could have been charged with, and we will discuss whether or not the elements for those crimes were in fact satisfied.